The nanny was fired without reason until the millionaire's little daughter revealed something that left him in shock. Subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from. The July sun mercilessly beat down on the asphalt of Lakeview that Thursday morning, creating heat waves that distorted the view of the perfectly manicured gardens of Block 10. It was the kind of dry morning that only Boston knew, when the air seemed to suck all the moisture from your lungs, and the surrounding countryside cried out for rain. In the mansion at number 847, an imposing three-story house with a travertine marble facade and tinted glass windows, something was about to change forever. Benita Smith, 42 years old, adjusted her black curls pinned in a low bun one last time as she descended the mahogany stairs of the residence. Her calloused hands from work firmly held the handle of her brown synthetic leather bag, a gift she had given herself when she received her first paycheck as the nanny for the Smith family. It had been 5 years working in that house, 5 years caring for little Lucy as if she were her own daughter, and now it would all end without a decent explanation. "Benita, can you come to my office, please?" The cold voice of Congressman Robert Smith echoed through the entrance hall, where Austrian crystal chandeliers reflected the morning light in thousands of golden fragments. He was standing in the doorway of his private sanctuary, wearing an impeccable navy blue suit and an Italian silk tie that cost more than 2 minimum wages. The woman from Quincy felt her stomach tighten. She recognized that tone of voice. It was the same one he used in television interviews when he wanted to end an uncomfortable subject. Her bare feet, she always took off her shoes to avoid making noise when Lucy was sleeping, treaded on the cold marble floor like a premonition of what was to come. The congressman's office was a temple to power and ostentation. Solid wood shelves rose from floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound legal codes, biographies of illustrious politicians, and some first editions he collected more for status than for a love of reading. On the main wall, a gigantic painting depicted the Capitol from above, while framed diplomas in gold attested to his law degree from Boston University and his master's in public policy from the United States. "Have a seat, Benita." Robert did not lift his eyes from the papers scattered on the rosewood desk. At 45, he was the kind of man who inspired equal measures of respect and fear. Grey hair at his temples, designer glasses, an athletic build maintained by a personal trainer 3 times a week. His hands, which had never known calluses or scars, drummed impatiently on a sealed manila folder. Benita settled into the black leather armchair, her back straight as she had learned from her mother. "Mr. Robert, is something wrong? Is Lucy okay?" "Lucy is perfectly fine. Thank you for asking." He finally raised his eyes, and Benita saw a coldness in them that made her shiver. "Benita, after much thought, we have concluded that we need to make some adjustments in the family dynamic. Your presence here is no longer necessary." The words fell on her like stones. "No longer? What do you mean, Mr. Robert? Did I do something wrong? Did Lucy complain about me? I can improve, I can—" "It's not about performance." He opened the folder and took out a thick envelope. "Here are your documents, a letter of recommendation, and a severance package that exceeds what the law requires. You have been an exemplary employee, Benita, but our family is entering a new phase." The woman from Quincy felt her hands tremble. "But Lucy, she will be confused, Mr. Robert. We have a routine. She loves my stories, the meals I make. She will be lost. Lucy is a resilient child. She will adapt." His voice had the hardness of steel. "We have already hired a new nanny, a professional with a degree in education and international references. It will be better for her development." Outside, the distant sound of traffic on I-90 mixed with the hum of the mansion's air conditioning units. Benita closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the first time she held Lucy in her arms, still a 6-month-old baby, motherless and craving paternal affection. She recalled the sleepless nights when the girl had a fever, the afternoons playing at the residential playground, the colorful drawings Lucy made for her with crayons. "Can I say goodbye to her?" Her voice came out as a whisper. Robert checked his Rolex watch. "It's better not to. Goodbyes prolong the suffering. The new nanny arrives this afternoon." At that moment, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway, followed by the high-pitched, cheerful voice that Benita knew better than any melody. "Aunt Benita! Aunt Benita! Where are you? I want to show you my new drawing." Lucy Smith burst into the office like a ray of sunshine. At 5 years old, she was a miniature version of the mother she never knew. Curly brown hair that refused to be tied back, green eyes sparkling with infinite curiosity, and a smile that could melt the hardest heart. She wore a yellow dress with a butterfly print, a gift from Benita on her last birthday, and held a crumpled piece of paper in her tiny hands. "Honey, we're in an important meeting." Robert stood up, his face tense. "But, Daddy, I drew a picture of our family going to the park." Lucy ran to Benita and climbed onto her lap without hesitation, extending the paper. It was a typical child's drawing, circles representing heads, lines for arms and legs, and so much love in every color chosen. "Look, this is you, Aunt Benita, this is me, and this is Daddy. We're all hands given." Benita felt a lump in her throat. "It's beautiful, my love. You draw better every day." "Aunt Benita, you look sad. Did something happen?" Lucy touched the nanny's face with her palm, a gesture she had done since she was little, when she noticed someone was upset. It was then that Robert approached the chair. "Lucy, Aunt Benita is leaving today. She found another job." The world seemed to stop. Lucy looked at her father, then at Benita, her green eyes filling with tears. "Leaving? But she can't leave. She lives here with us." "No, sweetheart, she doesn't live here. She works here, and now she will work somewhere else." Robert's voice was controlled, but Benita noticed the muscle in his jaw tightening. "No, I don't want her to go. Aunt Benita, you can't leave." Lucy clung to the nanny's neck with desperate strength. "I promise I'll be better. I promise I'll eat all my food. I promise that it's not because of you, my angel." Benita kissed the top of the girl's head, breathing in one last time that scent of children's shampoo mixed with the sweet perfume of childhood. "You are the most perfect girl in the world." "Then why are you leaving?" Lucy pulled back to look into Benita's eyes, tears streaming down her rosy cheeks. "The people we love don't leave." The statement hit Benita like a punch to the chest. She looked at Robert, who had turned his gaze to the window, hands crossed behind his back. "Sometimes, my love, people need to follow different paths, but that doesn't mean love ends." "Lucy, let's go. Aunt Benita needs to pack her things." Robert moved closer to pick up his daughter, but she shrank even more into the nanny's lap. "No, I'm not letting her go!" Lucy shouted with surprising strength for her age. "Dad, you can't make her leave. She's part of our family." "Lucy, enough, you're being dramatic." Robert's patience was wearing thin, but Lucy didn't stop. On the contrary, she looked directly at her father and, with the brutal honesty of children, uttered the words that would change everything. "She has the same heart as Mommy in heaven. Mommy told me." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert turned pale, as if he had seen a ghost. Benita felt a shiver run down her spine, because Lucy had never spoken about her mother this way before. The girl, in turn, seemed as surprised as the adults by her own words. What did you say?" Robert approached slowly, his voice almost inaudible. "Mommy in heaven told me." Lucy spoke more softly now, as if revealing an important secret. "She said Aunt Benita has the same heart as her. A heart that cares, that protects, that loves without wanting anything in return. Benita felt her legs weaken. Suddenly, the memories she had kept locked away began to emerge like water from a broken dam. The young Mary, Robert's wife, in St. Mary's Hospital in Quincy. The whispered conversations in the ICU corridors. The promise made on a rainy March afternoon 6 years ago. "Lucy, sweetheart, what do you mean Mommy told you?" Robert knelt in front of the chair, his hands trembling imperceptibly. "I dream about her sometimes." Lucy wiped her nose on her dress sleeve. "She's beautiful and smells nice, and she told me that Aunt Benita came here because she asked to take care of me until I grow up." Robert looked at Benita over his daughter's head, and for the first time in 5 years, she saw in those eyes something beyond professional coldness. She saw fear, confusion, and an old pain he was trying to hide behind the masks of power. Benita took a deep breath. Maybe it was time to tell the truth she had carried as a burden for so long. Maybe it was time to honor the promise she made to a dying woman on a March afternoon in Quincy. "Mr. Robert," she said, her voice steady despite the tears, "I think we need to talk." Chapter 2. Secrets of the Past. Robert Smith's office had never seemed so small. The central air conditioning hummed softly, but it couldn't dissipate the tension that hung over the three of them like a storm cloud in the skies of the Central Highlands. Lucy remained clinging to Benita's neck, her sobs gradually diminishing until they turned into quiet sniffles. Robert had risen from his kneeling position and was now pacing back and forth, hands in his dress pants pockets, his expression more serious than Benita had ever seen in 5 years of acquaintance. "Lucy, my angel," Benita whispered in the girl's ear. "How about you go play in your room while Daddy and I talk? Later, I'll come up to tell you a beautiful story." "You won't leave while I'm upstairs, will you?" The girl's voice was hoarse from crying, and her red eyes sought a reassurance Benita knew she couldn't give. "I promise I won't leave without saying goodbye properly." The nanny kissed the child's warm forehead, trying to convey all the security she could muster in that moment of total uncertainty. Lucy slid reluctantly from Benita's lap, casting suspicious glances at her father before leaving the office. Her bare footsteps echoed down the marble hallway until they disappeared up the stairs leading to the second floor, where her room was decorated with unicorn wallpaper and an impressive collection of dolls of all sizes and colors. Robert closed the heavy wooden door and leaned against it, as if he wanted to prevent any words from the conversation about to happen from leaking out to the rest. From the mansion. His face, usually controlled and impassive during political meetings and television interviews, now showed a vulnerability that Benita had never witnessed before. "Benita," he began, his voice lower than usual, "you met Mary before she died, didn't you?" The question fell into the room like a stone thrown into a still lake. Benita felt her heart race so fast that she feared he might hear it pounding. For 5 years, she had kept this secret like a buried treasure, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. Now, provoked by the innocent words of a 5-year-old child, that moment had arrived abruptly and unexpectedly. "Yes," she replied, the word escaping like a sigh. "I met Mrs. Mary." Robert stepped away from the door and walked to the window overlooking the meticulously cared-for garden tended by gardeners who came 3 times a week. Outside, the cherry trees had not yet bloomed. It was too early in the dry season, but the palm trees swayed gently in the warm afternoon breeze approaching. How? He didn't turn to face her. Where? Benita took a deep breath, seeking strength in the memories of her mother, Mrs. Johnson, who always said that the truth was like bitter medicine, hard to swallow but necessary for healing. At St. Mary's Hospital in Quincy, I worked there as a cleaning assistant on the night shift. It was March 2018. She paused, seeing Robert tense his shoulders under the fine fabric of his blazer. I was cleaning the ICU corridor when a nurse asked me to help. In a room, she said there was a very young, very scared patient who kept asking for someone named Benita. They thought it might be me. But you didn't know each other. It wasn't a question. Robert knew his wife's routine. He was aware of her friendships, of all the places she frequented. Mary was the daughter of a traditional family from Atlanta, graduated in psychology from Emory University, with a social life limited to the circles of the elite in Atlanta and Boston. No, we didn't know each other. Benita stood up from the armchair and walked to one of the bookshelves, observing the books that had likely never been opened. But when I entered her room, Mr. Robert, it was as if she recognized me, as if she had been waiting for me. The memory transported her back to that night in March, when Boston was still at the end of summer and sporadic rains created a sticky humidity in the air. St. Mary's Hospital was not one of the most modern in the capital, but it served the population of Quincy and surrounding towns well. Benita had gotten the job as a cleaning assistant through a cousin who worked at the reception, and for 2 years she had been cleaning corridors, bathrooms, and rooms during the silent nights. She was very thin, Benita continued, her voice choked, very pale. She had given birth just 2 weeks earlier, but the doctors said she had a very serious infection, feverish, delirious at times. But when she saw me, her eyes brightened, and she said, "I knew you would come. I prayed so much for you to come." Robert then turned, and Benita saw that his eyes were red. She was dying, and I didn't even know. The doctors told me it was just a postpartum infection that would be treated with antibiotics. I believed them because I wanted to believe. She knew, Mr. Robert. Deep down, she knew. Benita returned to the armchair, her legs trembling with the force of the memories. She asked me to sit in the chair next to the bed and held my hand. She said she had prayed for God to send someone with a mother's heart to take care of Lucy when she was no longer here. The congressman approached the table, resting both hands on the wooden surface as if he needed physical support to hear the rest of the story. What else did she say? A lot. Benita closed her eyes, allowing Mary's words to echo again in her mind. She told me about you, about how you met at university, about the plans you had for Lucy. She told me you were a good man, but very closed off, that you had difficulty showing love. And she made me promise. What promise? Benita opened her synthetic leather bag and pulled out a yellowed envelope, kept with such care that it seemed a sacred relic. She gave me this and made me swear that if I ever had the opportunity to take care of Lucy, I would accept, and that when the right time came, I would tell the girl about the love her mother had for her. Robert looked at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. What's inside? A letter for Lucy, and a photo. Benita held the envelope against her chest. She gave it to me when the doctors left the room to get more medication. She said she felt she wouldn't survive the night and needed to leave something for her daughter beyond the memories you would keep. Silence, once again, dominated the office. Outside, the distant noise of a lawnmower mixed with the sound of cars passing on the avenue in Lakeview. Robert ran his hand through his hair, messing up the impeccable hairstyle for the first time since Benita had met him. "Why didn't you ever tell me this?" His voice had a tone of accusation and pain mixed together. "Because Mrs. Mary asked me not to tell. She said you weren't ready to hear it yet, that you needed time to process the loss. And she was right, wasn't she?" Benita looked him directly in the eye. "In 5 years, how many times have you talked to me about her? How many times have you mentioned her name in front of Lucy?" Robert looked away, and Benita knew she had hit the mark. The congressman had turned his wife's death into a sealed wound, never healed. only hidden behind work, meetings, and political commitments that kept him too busy to feel the pain. "I didn't know how to talk about her," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "Every time I looked at Lucy, I saw Mary's face. It was too hard. And that's why Lucy grew up not knowing anything about her mother, not knowing what kind of person she was, not knowing how much she was loved." There was a hardness in Benita's voice that surprised them both. "The girl is 5 years old, Mr. Robert, and she doesn't even know what her mother's smile looked like." The words hit Robert like slaps. He let himself fall into the presidential chair behind the desk, the powerful man who commanded million-dollar projects in Congress, reduced to a lost widower, haunted by his own fears. "Did she say anything about why she specifically chose you?" He asked the question while looking at his own hands. Benita smiled for the first time since she had entered that office. "She said she saw compassion in my eyes when I cleaned her room on the previous nights, that I whispered prayers while I worked, and that calmed her. And she said that somehow she knew I would understand what it meant to love a child more than life itself." "Do you have children?" Robert looked at her intently, realizing that despite 5 years of acquaintance, he practically knew nothing about the personal life of the woman who had raised his daughter. "I did." The answer came laden with an ancient sadness. "A boy, John Peter. He died of pneumonia when he was 3 years old. That was in 2015, before I moved to Boston." The revelation hit Robert like a lightning bolt. Suddenly, a lot of things made sense. Benita's infinite patience with Lucy, the way she knew exactly what to do when the girl was sick, the maternal affection that overflowed in every gesture, every care. "I'm so sorry," he said, and for the first time in 5 years, Benita heard genuine sincerity in his voice. "I didn't know. You had no reason to know. It wasn't a boss's business to an employee." She stood up again, walking to the window. "But maybe Mary knew. Maybe she felt that I would understand what it is to lose someone we love, and that's why I would know how to give Lucy the kind of love that protects without suffocating." Robert remained silent for a long moment, processing everything he had heard. Outside, the shadows of the IPE trees began to stretch across the garden, indicating that the afternoon was advancing and that Lucy would soon come down to look for them. "The letter," he finally said. "Can I see the letter?" Benita hesitated for a moment, then extended the yellowed envelope. "It's not for you, Mr. Robert. It's for Lucy." "I know." He took the envelope with careful reverence. "But maybe it's time for me to know my wife's last words." When Robert opened the envelope and began to read the delicate and shaky handwriting of Mary, his last defenses finally crumbled. The tears he had suppressed for 5 years began to flow silently down his face, and Benita realized that this moment marked the beginning of a profound change in the life of that shattered family. Continue 11:55. Chapter 3. The Letter That Changed Everything. Mary's handwriting danced on the yellowed pages like trapped butterflies, delicate and shaky, reflecting the fragility of a mother who knew she was living her last moments. Robert held the letter with trembling hands, and for the first time in 5 years, he allowed the tears to flow freely down his face. Benita remained standing by the window, respecting the intimacy of that moment that she had kept as a sacred promise. "My golden Lucy," Robert read. Aloud, his voice choked. "If you are reading this letter, it means that Aunt Benita kept the promise she made to me. It means that she found you, loved you, and now it's time for you to know some important things about your mommy." He paused, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. The office felt smaller now, suffocating with the weight of emotions that finally had permission to exist. Outside, Benita could hear the distant sound of Mrs. Smith, the 60-year-old housekeeper who ran the house with an iron fist and a heart of gold, preparing Lucy's afternoon snack. When you were born, Robert continued reading, you were the most beautiful child I had ever seen. Your green eyes were just like mine, but your smile was identical to your daddy's. You only cried a little, as if you knew you were very much awaited and loved. I held you in my arms and promised that I would be the best mother in the world. Robert's voice completely broke. Benita stepped closer and placed a delicate hand on his shoulder, the same maternal gesture she made with Lucy when the girl woke from nightmares. Continue, she whispered. She needs you to read. Robert took a deep breath and resumed reading. But sometimes, my princess, mummies have to leave earlier than they would like. It's not because they don't love their little ones. It's because the heart of the earth needs new flowers for the garden of heaven. I will become a star that will shine for you every night. At that moment, hurried footsteps echoed in the hallway. Lucy had come down from her room, probably worried about the delay in the adults' conversation. Her high-pitched voice called from outside the door. Daddy, Aunt Benita, why are you taking so long? Robert looked at Benita with a panicked expression. I don't know if I'm ready for this. No one is ever ready for these conversations, Benita replied with the wisdom of someone who had learned about loss in her own skin. But Lucy is. She has been ready for a long time. The door opened slowly. Lucy peeked through a crack, her curious and worried green eyes shining. Can I come in? Have you finished your adult conversation? Robert quickly tucked the letter back into the envelope, but Lucy had already noticed his tears. With the keen intuition of children, she rushed to her father and climbed onto his lap, uninvited. Daddy, why are you crying? Did I do something wrong? Her tiny hands gently touched Robert's wet face with infinite tenderness. No, my love, you didn't do anything wrong. In fact, you did something very right. Robert pulled her closer, feeling for the first time in years the urgent need to embrace his daughter. You reminded Daddy of some very important things. Lucy settled comfortably in his lap, a gesture of trust he had forgotten he could feel. What important things? Lucy asked, playing with her. Father's expensive tie. Benita approached and knelt beside the chair, bringing herself to Lucy's eye level. Lucy, do you remember what you said about your mommy in heaven? That she said Aunt Benita has a heart just like hers. Lucy nodded seriously. It was in a very real dream. She was wearing a beautiful white dress and smelled like rose perfume. Robert and Benita exchanged glances. Roses were Mary's favorite flowers. She used to grow rose bushes in the garden of their previous home, a smaller house in West Quincy, and always wore perfume with Bulgarian rose essence. Your mommy in heaven was right, Benita said softly, and she left something very special for you. Lucy's eyes widened. She left? What? Robert took a deep breath, feeling he was about to cross an irreversible bridge. A letter, princess. A letter she wrote for you when you were just a little baby. Can I see it? Can I read it? Lucy instantly perked up, as all 5-year-olds do at the prospect of discovering something new and exciting. You still don't know how to read adult letters, Robert said gently, but Daddy can read it to you if you want. Lucy nodded, vigorously, her curls bouncing. I want to! I really want to! Robert looked again at Benita, who nodded encouragingly. With trembling hands, he took the letter from the envelope and unfolded the yellowed pages. Lucy snuggled more comfortably in his lap, a gesture of trust he had forgotten he could feel. My golden Lucy, he began, this time with a firmer voice. If you are listening to this letter, it means Aunt Benita kept the promise she made to me. What promise? Lucy interrupted, looking at Benita with curiosity. The promise to take care of you with a lot of love until you grow up, Benita explained. Your mommy asked me to do that when you were a tiny baby. Lucy processed the information with the seriousness of children who sense the importance of the moments they are living. Go on, Daddy. Robert resumed reading, and as Mary's words filled the room, something magical began to happen. Lucy asked questions. Why did Mommy become a star? If she could see her from her bedroom window, if stars missed people too? Robert answered as best he could, discovering that talking about Mary, far from being painful as he always imagined, was actually liberating. "Your mommy was very much like you," he said, stroking his daughter's hair. "She also asked thousands of questions, loved to draw, and had this habit of climbing onto people's laps when she was talking." "And did she like Aunt Benita?" Lucy asked, turning to look at the babysitter. "She loved Aunt Benita," Robert replied, and for the first time he understood the magnitude of what had happened that night in the hospital. "Your mommy knew that Aunt Benita had a special heart, a heart that knew how to love children the right way." Benita felt her, eyes fill with tears. For 5 years, she had cared for Lucy with unconditional love, but always felt like an intruder in the family, like someone temporary who would be replaced when Robert decided. Discovering that Mary had orchestrated her presence in her daughter's life was like receiving a posthumous blessing. "Is there more in the letter?" Lucy asked, trying to stretch her neck to see the pages. "Yes, there is." Robert turned the page. "Your mommy wrote about the dreams she had for you. She wanted you to grow up brave, kind, and smart. She wanted you to know that you can be anything you want, a doctor, a teacher, an artist, even a congresswoman like Daddy." "Can I be a babysitter like Aunt Benita?" Lucy asked innocently. The question hit Robert like a lightning bolt. He looked at Benita, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in 5 years. He saw a 42-year-old woman who had dedicated the best years of her life to raising a child who was not hers. He saw calloused hands that had combed hair, prepared bottles, wiped tears, and offered unconditional love. He saw a natural educator who had taught Lucy to tie her shoes, share toys, say please and thank you, be kind to animals, and respectful to elders. "Being a babysitter is a very important profession," he finally said, his voice filled with newfound admiration. "Babysitters take care of the most precious thing in the world, children." Lucy smiled, satisfied with the answer. "And can I keep living with Aunt Benita forever?" The question hung in the air like a promise and a plea at the same time. Robert looked at Benita, seeing in her no longer the employee he had hired for convenience, but the woman Mary had chosen to be his daughter's second mother. "Lucy," he said slowly, "how about we talk about this more calmly? There's a lot that Dad still needs to understand." But Lucy, with the typical determination of children who know exactly what they want, shook her head. "You don't need to talk, Dad. I already know that Aunt Benita can't leave. Mommy in heaven chose her especially for our family." And at that moment, surrounded by the posthumous words of his wife and the transparent love of his daughter, Robert Smith understood that perhaps it was time to stop running from the past and start building a future where love could exist without fear, where losses could coexist with gratitude, and where a humble nanny from rural Massachusetts could be recognized for what she had always been, a gift from God disguised as a caregiver. Chapter 4. Revelations in the Garden. The rest of that afternoon passed like a strange and liberating dream. Robert had cancelled all political commitments, a meeting with the agricultural lobby, a gathering with agribusiness executives, a charity dinner at the Congressional Club, putting family before career for the first time in 5 years. Lucy stayed close to Benita and her father, as if fearing that the magic of that moment could dissolve if she lost sight of either of them. Mrs. Smith, the housekeeper who had run the household with military efficiency for 15 years, observed the unusual activity with suspicious eyes. Tall and thin, with greying hair always tied in a tight bun, she wore impeccably pressed uniforms and kept the house running like a Swiss clock. Benita had always known that Mrs. Smith didn't fully approve of her presence there, not out of malice, but due to a sense of domestic hierarchy that the housekeeper considered sacred. Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith appeared at the office door at 5 in the afternoon. Dinner will be served at 7, as usual. Should I prepare Miss Lucy's meal in her room, or will you all be dining in the dining room tonight? It was a question loaded with subtext. Lucy always dined in her room, accompanied by Benita, while Robert ate alone in the vast dining room, reading reports or watching the news. The suggestion of dining together was so unusual that it felt like a domestic revolution. "Let's have dinner together in the dining room," Robert replied, surprising himself with the decision. "And Mrs. Smith, please set a place for Benita as well." The housekeeper raised an eyebrow, but nodded professionally. "Yes, sir. Any preference for the menu?" Lucy, who had been playing with some toys she had brought from her room, perked up excitedly. "Can you make that saffron fish that Aunt Benita taught you? Please, Mrs. Smith, it's the tastiest in the world." Benita felt her face flush. During her years working there, she had occasionally taught some northeastern recipes to Mrs. Smith, always fearing she was intruding on the housekeeper's territory. The saffron fish was a recipe from her grandmother, adapted with ingredients available in Boston. "It is indeed a very tasty recipe," Mrs. Smith admitted, and for the first time, Benita saw something close to a smile on the housekeeper's stern face. "I'll take care of it." When they were alone again, Robert stood up from the presidential chair and walked to the window. The sun was beginning to set over Lakeview, painting the sky in orange hues that reflected in the waters of Lake Paranoa in the distance. It was the kind of sunset that made Boston look like the most beautiful city in the world, even with all the aridity of the savannah and the scorching heat of July days. "Benita," he said without turning around, "I need you to tell me everything about that night at the hospital. Everything." Lucy was distracted with a doll whose hair she was trying to comb with a tiny brush, so Benita felt free to speak in more detail. Mrs. Mary was very weak, but very lucid. "She knew she was dying, Mr. Smith. The doctors might not have known, but she did." "How are you so sure?" "Because she told me." Benita moved, closer to the window, standing beside him. She said, "Benita, I won't see the sun rise tomorrow, but I need you to promise me one thing." I tried to tell her she shouldn't think like that the doctors would be able to cure her, but she interrupted me. Robert finally turned to face her. "What else did she say?" "A lot about you. She said you were the kindest man she knew, but that you had difficulty dealing with feelings, that you lost your parents very early, and that's why you learned to protect yourself by not getting too attached to people." Benita paused. Was she right? The question hit him like a punch to the stomach. Robert had lost his parents in a car accident when he was 15, being raised afterward by a strict aunt in Atlanta who believed that displays of affection were signs of weakness. He had grown up too fast, studying on scholarships and working to pay for college, building an emotional armor that protected him during his political rise, but prevented him from truly connecting with people. "She was," he admitted. "I've always been afraid of getting too attached and then losing. And when she died, you distanced yourself from Lucy to avoid feeling the pain of losing her too," Benita gently completed. "Mrs. Mary knew this would happen. That's why she asked me to take care of her. Not just physically, but emotionally too." Lucy abandoned the doll and approached the adults, climbing onto an armchair to be at their height by the window. "Look how beautiful the sky is," she exclaimed, pointing to the clouds tinged with pink and gold. "Mommy in heaven is painting a picture for us." The innocence of the observation made Robert smile for the first time. That day, a genuine smile that completely transformed his face. "Do you think Mommy knows how to paint?" "Of course. She must know how to make—" "Everything is up there in the sky." Lucy spoke with the absolute conviction of children. Aunt Benita, tell Dad about the drawings that Mom made for me. Benita looked confused. What drawings, my love? The ones I dream about. She shows me drawings from when I was a baby, from when you two met, and how she chose you to be my second mom. Lucy spoke excitedly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Robert felt a shiver run down his spine. Lucy, do you dream about this often? Almost every night, but I never told anyone because I thought you would think I was making it up. Lucy swung her legs, which didn't reach the ground. But today I felt like I could tell. Benita and Robert exchanged looks filled with astonishment and emotion. It was impossible for Lucy to know details about Benita's meeting with Mary at the hospital. She was too young when it happened, and no one had ever told her that story. What else? Does Mom from the sky tell you in these dreams? Benita asked, her voice trembling. She says that Dad is very brave, but sometimes needs help remembering how to give hugs. Lucy looked at Robert seriously. And that Aunt Benita has a heart that never stops caring for people, even when they don't ask. The girl's words echoed in the office like prophecies. Robert knelt in front of the armchair where Lucy was sitting, bringing himself to her eye level. Princess, he said, his voice choked, would you like Aunt Benita to keep living here with us, forever? Lucy nodded, so vigorously that her curls bounced. I want to. I want it so much. We can be a real family, just like in the drawings I make. Then that's what we will be, Robert said, reaching out his hand to Benita. A real family. When Benita placed her calloused hand in the soft hand of the congressman, she felt she was sealing a pact that went far beyond work-related issues. It was the realization of a promise made on a sad night in March, the fulfillment of a dream she had never dared to have, to truly belong to a family. But Mr. Robert, she said, practicality speaking louder, what will people say? Your political friends, society in Boston, a maid from the Northeast being part of a congressman's family? Robert stood up, pulling Lucy onto his lap. Benita, I spent 5 years caring about what others thought and almost lost the most important thing in my life, my daughter. If someone has a problem with our family, the problem is theirs, not ours. At that moment, Mrs. Smith knocked on the door. Mr. Robert, sorry for the interruption, but there's a journalist from NBC at the front desk. She says she received a report about mistreatment of a domestic worker and wants to ask some questions. Robert's blood ran cold. Report? What report? Apparently someone called the newsroom saying you fired a nanny abusively this morning, without just cause and without respecting labor rights. Mrs. Smith looked from Robert to Benita with a worried expression. The journalist wants to hear both sides of the story. Robert clenched his fists. I already know who it was. My sister-in-law Victoria. She was here yesterday and heard when I talked to you about hiring a new nanny. Benita felt her stomach tighten. Victoria was Mary's sister, a bitter 45-year-old woman who had never married and always made it clear that she considered Benita unfit to care for Lucy. She lived in Atlanta but visited Boston once a month and always found faults in the nanny's work. What do we do? Lucy asked, sensing the tension of the adults. Robert set her down and walked to the desk, pulling out the phone. We will do the right thing. Mrs. Smith, ask the journalist to wait in the living room. I will give an interview. Mr. Robert, are you sure? Benita was pale. This could harm your political career. Benita, he said, dialing a number. My political career is worth nothing if I can't protect my family. And now, you two are my family. As he waited for the call to connect, Robert looked out the window at the garden where Lucy had played so many times alone, where Benita had spent entire afternoons pushing swings and building sandcastles in a box she had specially installed for the girl. It was time to show the world that some things were more important than social appearances and political conveniences. It was time to fight for The family that Mary had dreamed for them. Chapter 5. The Media Storm. The living room of the mansion had never seemed so intimidating. Decorated with antique furniture and paintings by renowned Boston artists, it used to host ministers, businessmen, and other politicians for discreet meetings accompanied by imported whiskey and Cuban cigars. Now it housed an investigative journalist whose sharp gaze swept every detail of the environment in search of contradictions between the public discourse and the private life of Congressman Robert Smith. Mariana Silveira, a reporter for NBC with 15 years of experience covering political scandals in Boston, was not easily impressed by luxury. A 40-year-old black woman, she graduated in journalism from Harvard University and specialized in social investigations. She had uncovered several corruption schemes and had a reputation for being relentless when she sensed injustice. Her curly hair was styled in an elegant bun, and she wore a navy blue blazer that conveyed professional seriousness. "Congressman Smith," she said as Robert entered the room accompanied by Benita and Lucy, "thank you for receiving me on such short notice. I received a serious report about the treatment of your domestic worker and would like to clarify the facts." Robert sat in the main armchair, pulling Lucy onto his lap, in a gesture that the journalist immediately noticed. Benita remained standing, visibly nervous, her hands clasped in front of her. "Take a seat, Benita," Robert said gently. "You are part of this conversation." The nanny hesitated, but complied, settling into an armchair next to Robert's. The journalist turned on her phone recorder and opened her notebook. "Congressman, is it true that you dismissed your nanny this morning without just cause and without fulfilling labor obligations?" The question was direct, without beating around the bush. "It is true that I tried to let Benita go this morning," Robert replied calmly, "but not for performance issues or failure to meet labor obligations. It was for misguided personal reasons that fortunately I managed to correct in time." Mary raised an eyebrow. "Misguided personal reasons. Can you elaborate?" Robert took a deep breath, aware that his next words could change the course of his political career. "Mary, may I call you that? 5 years ago, when my wife passed away, I emotionally shut down. I thought hiring a nanny with an academic background would be better for my daughter than keeping someone I considered just a domestic worker. And why did you change your mind? Because my daughter made me realize that I was making a terrible mistake. Benita is not just an employee. She is the woman my wife personally chose to care for Lucy." The journalist stopped writing and looked directly at Robert. "What do you mean, personally chose? Your wife died when the child was a baby, didn't she?" It was then that Lucy, who had remained quiet until that moment, decided to join the conversation. "Mommy in heaven told Aunt Benita to take care of me," she said with the absolute conviction of a 5-year-old. "She told Aunt Benita that in the hospital." Mary looked from Robert to Benita with renewed interest. "Can I hear that story in more detail?" Benita looked at Robert, who nodded encouragingly. With her voice initially trembling but gaining strength as she spoke, she recounted the night at St. Mary's Hospital, the encounter with dying Mary, the promise made, and the letter kept like a treasure. "Do you still have that letter?" the journalist asked. "I do." Benita pulled the yellowed envelope from her bag. "I kept it for 5 years, waiting for the right moment to give it to Lucy." Mary examined the envelope, noting the delicate handwriting and the date, March 2018. "And did the congressman know about this letter?" "No," Robert replied honestly. "I only found out today. For 5 years, I lived thinking that Benita was just a competent employee. I didn't know my wife had orchestrated everything." "Uncle Robert," Lucy interrupted, using a more familiar address for the first time, "tell the lady from the TV about the dreams I have with Mommy." The journalist leaned forward, intrigued. Stories involving children always had the potential to move the audience. but she needed to be careful not to exploit the girl. "What dreams, dear?" she asked gently. "I dream about Mommy in heaven almost every night. She tells me stories about when I was a baby and how Aunt Benita has a special heart." Lucy spoke naturally, swinging her legs. "Today she told me it was time to tell the truth to everyone." Mary felt a chill. 20 years covering politics had made her skeptical of overly emotional stories, but there was something in the sincerity of that child that touched her deeply. "Congressman," she said, turning to Robert, "do you understand that this situation could generate controversy? An elite politician treating a domestic worker as a family member." "I understand perfectly," Robert replied, his voice taking on the firm tone he used in the House chamber. "And I want to make it clear that Benita is no longer my employee. From today, she is officially Lucy's legal guardian and a member of this family." The declaration landed in the room like a bombshell. Mary stopped writing and stared at Robert. "Legal guardian? Are you going to share custody of your daughter?" "I will do what I should have done 5 years ago. Honor my wife's last wishes." Robert pulled Lucy closer. "Mary didn't choose Benita by chance. She saw in her the qualities that I was blind to see. Unconditional love, infinite patience, and a capacity to care that goes far beyond contractual obligations." Benita felt her eyes fill with tears. For years, she had secretly dreamed of this recognition, but she never imagined it would come so publicly and definitively. "And you, Benita?" the journalist addressed the nanny. "How do you feel being treated as a family member instead of an employee?" It's like a dream coming true," Benita replied, her voice choked. "I've always loved Lucy, as if she were my own daughter. I lost my own son a few years ago, and taking care of her has given me a new purpose in life." "You lost a son?" Mary leaned forward, realizing there were more layers to this story. "My Juan Pedro died of pneumonia when he was 3 years old, in 2015, in Massachusetts." Benita wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "Maybe that's why Mrs. Mary entrusted Lucy to me. She knew I would understand what it means to love a child more than life itself." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Mary, who had witnessed confessions of corruption involving millions without blinking, felt a lump in her throat. This was not a story about politics or scandals. It was a story about love, loss, and second chances. "Congressman," she finally said, "do you understand that this decision could affect your political career? Some voters may not understand." Robert stood up, still holding Lucy in his arms. "Mary, 5 years ago I almost lost my daughter because I worried too much about what others would think. I won't make the same mistake twice." He walked over to the window, where they could see the garden where Lucy and Benita had spent so many afternoons playing. "If my voters can't understand that a family can be formed in different ways, then maybe I'm not the right representative for them. Are you afraid that the opposition will use this against your re-election campaign?" "Let them," Robert replied firmly. "I'd rather lose an election doing the right thing than win by perpetuating injustices." Lucy, who had been attentively following the conversation, decided to end the topic in her own way. "TV lady, do you want to see the drawing I made of our family?" Mary Smith smiled, the first genuine smile since she arrived at the mansion. "I would love to see it, dear." Lucy jumped off her father's lap and ran to a side table where she had left her drawing materials. She returned with a colourful paper showing 3 figures holding hands, a larger one with dark hair, clearly Benita, a small one in the middle, herself, and a male figure in a suit, Robert. Above them, a 4th female figure floated among pink clouds. "This is Daddy, this is me, this is Aunt Benita, and this is Mommy in heaven watching over all of us," Lucy explained, pointing to each figure. Mary Smith looked at the drawing and realized she had found more than just a news story. She had discovered a tale of redemption that could touch the hearts of millions of Americans at a time when the country desperately needed examples of love, overcoming prejudice. "Congressman," she said, putting away her recorder, "can I come back tomorrow with a camera crew? I think this story deserves to be told in more depth." Robert looked at Benita, who nodded nervously. "You can come back," he replied. "It's time to show America that families are built with love, not DNA." When the journalist left the mansion, the trio remained in the living room for a few minutes in silence. Outside, the Boston sky began to darken, and the first stars appeared in the vastness of the countryside. "Daddy," Lucy said, breaking the silence, "now everyone will know that our family is special?" Robert smiled, kissing the top of his daughter's head. "Everyone will know, Princess, and most importantly, we will know." The show Good Morning America aired at 7:15 on Friday morning, with a segment that would have all of Boston talking for weeks. Mary Smith's report had been edited with sensitivity, showcasing the Lakeview mansion, the emotional testimonies, and, most importantly, Lucy's drawings explaining her special family. The title of the segment was straightforward: "Congressman recognizes Nanny as family member after discovering late wife's last wish." Robert watched the program in the mansion's kitchen, sipping coffee brewed by Benita while Lucy enjoyed her morning chocolate milk. It was the first time in years that the three shared breakfast, and there was something comforting in that simple routine that contrasted with the approaching storm. "Look, Daddy, my drawing on TV!" Lucy exclaimed, pointing to the screen where her artwork was displayed in close-up. She was radiant, as if having her art shown on national television was the greatest achievement of her life. Benita remained quiet, watching her own words being broadcast to millions of Americans. Part of her felt exposed and vulnerable, but another part experienced a sense of freedom she hadn't known in years. Finally, the truth had been told. The house phone began to ring at 7:30. Mrs. Smith answered the calls with military efficiency, jotting down names on a list that grew by the minute: congressional aides, journalists from other outlets, fellow congressmen, and an increasing number of unknown people wanting to congratulate or criticize Robert's decision. "Mr. Smith?" Mrs. Smith appeared in the kitchen with a worried expression. "The press office is calling non-stop. They say social media is on fire with the segment." Robert sighed, knowing it was time to face the consequences of his exposure. "What kind of reaction are we having?" "Mixed, from what I've been told. There are a lot of people supporting you, but there are also heavy criticisms." Mrs. Smith consulted her notes. "And there's an urgent call from your sister-in-law, Mrs. Victoria. She said she needs to speak with you immediately." The name Victoria made Robert's jaw tighten. Mary's older sister had never approved of her marriage to an ambitious politician, and had always made it clear that she considered Lucy her moral responsibility since Mary's death. "Transfer the call to the office. Lucy, can you stay here with Aunt Benita? Daddy needs to sort some things out." Lucy nodded, more interested in drawing new pictures of the family than in the adults' worries. Benita, however, noticed the tension on Robert's face and felt a bad premonition forming in her chest. In the office, Robert answered the phone, already bracing for the storm that was coming. Victoria Smith Pacheco did not disappoint. "Robert, have you completely lost your mind?" His sister-in-law's shrill voice cut through the phone like a chainsaw. "I wake up today and see my niece on national television talking about a nanny being family. What kind of nonsense is this?" "Good morning to you too, Victoria," Robert replied with controlled irony. "And it's not nonsense. It's the truth that should have come to light years ago." "Truth? What truth? Some random maid making up stories about a conversation with Mary in the hospital." Victoria spoke as if she were spitting venom. "Mary was my sister, Robert. If she had made any such promise, she would have told me. Robert felt the anger rise in his throat. Did Mary tell you everything, Victoria? Did she tell you she was dying? Did she tell you she was afraid to leave Lucy alone with me because she knew I would shut down emotionally? The silence on the other end of the line lasted a few seconds. My sister was not dying, Robert. She had an infection that could have been treated if the doctors at that third-rate hospital had been more competent. Victoria. She was dying, and she knew it. The letter she left for Lucy proves it. Letter? What letter? That maid could have forged anything. Victoria was losing control. Robert, I'm going to file for custody of Lucy. I won't allow my niece to be raised by a housekeeper while you play this political theatre. The threat hit Robert like a punch. You have no legal right over Lucy. I do. I'm her aunt. I'm blood family. And I can prove that you're putting the child in an unsuitable environment. Victoria's voice dripped with hatred. I'm going to hire the best lawyers in Atlanta and show a judge that you're using my niece in a charade to win votes from the lower middle class. Victoria, you're making a mistake. The mistake was mine for not acting sooner. 5 years leaving Lucy in the care of this illiterate woman from the South, while you're too busy with politics to be a real father. The line went silent. Victoria had hung up on him. Robert stood for a few minutes holding the phone, processing the magnitude of the threat he had just received. Victoria wasn't bluffing. She had financial resources. She had inherited a considerable fortune from her parents and connections in the legal field in Atlanta. More importantly, she had the socio-economic profile that conservative courts tended to favor. White woman, upper class, law degree, no history of scandals. The phone rang again. This time it was John Carter, his press advisor for 10 years. Robert, what the hell did you do? John didn't waste time with pleasantries. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. There are journalists wanting interviews, politicians from your own party demanding explanations, and a conservative group calling you a communist for destroying the traditional family. Is there any positive reaction? Yes, a lot of popular support, especially from women and domestic workers. But Robert, you know how it works in Washington. Popular support doesn't vote in Congress. Robert leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of the decision he had made. John, what's your professional recommendation? Professionally, issue a statement saying you were misinterpreted by the press, that Benita is still employed but will receive a promotion and a raise. John paused. Personally, as a family man, tell everyone to screw off and do what you think is right. The honesty of his advisor brought a smile to Robert's face. Thank you for your honesty. Robert, there's one more thing. The Rural Caucus wants an emergency meeting today at 2 in the afternoon, and the leader of your party said he needs to talk to you first. Are they afraid this will affect the votes? They're afraid this will turn into a discussion about labor rights and minimum wage for domestic workers. You know how it is when a politician talks about maids, people start demanding better treatment for their own workers. Robert immediately understood the political dimension of the problem. His personal decision had inadvertently become a social banner. In the current political climate, any discussion about the rights of domestic workers could evolve into debates about social inequality and income distribution, topics that the Washington elite preferred to keep out of the spotlight. John, cancel all my appointments for today. I'm staying home with my family. Robert, are you sure? The caucus meeting. The caucus will have to wait. Today is my day to be a father. When he hung up the phone, Robert heard laughter coming from the kitchen. Lucy was telling some story to Benita, who was responding with the infinite patience she had always shown. It was a sound he had missed for years, too busy with meetings and political strategies to notice the simple joy happening daily in his own home. He walked to the kitchen and found Lucy teaching Benita how to draw butterflies on a sheet of brown paper. The two were sitting on the floor, surrounded by scattered colored pencils, completely absorbed in the activity. "Can I join the drawing lesson?" he asked, sitting down on the floor beside them. Lucy looked at him with surprise and joy. "Of course, Daddy. But do you know how to draw?" "Not very well, but I can learn." Benita offered him a green pencil. "Start slow, Mr. Robert. Drawing is like taking care of a child. It needs patience and love." As Robert tried to draw his first butterfly in years, the phone continued to ring in the living room. Outside, Washington buzzed with comments and speculations about the Smith family, but inside that mansion's kitchen, surrounded by colorful pencils and children's laughter, a powerful man was finally discovering that there were far more important things to protect than politics, and that some battles were worth fighting even if they cost an entire career. Monday arrived like a hurricane over the Smith family's life. Robert woke up at 5 in the morning with the phone ringing insistently, a practice that had become routine since the news segment aired on NBC. This time, the caller was Dr. Charles Smith, his personal lawyer for 15 years. "Robert, we have a serious problem." The lawyer's deep voice cut through any remnants of sleep. "Victoria. Pacheco filed for temporary custody of Lucy last night. The case is being processed under seal in the Atlanta court." Robert felt the blood freeze in his veins. "What do you mean under seal? And why in Atlanta?" "She claimed residency there and that Lucy was born in Atlanta, so they would have regional jurisdiction. And she managed to get it sealed, claiming it was for the child's protection." Dr. Charles paused heavily. "Robert, she hired Mark Johnson." The name made Robert sit up abruptly in bed. Mark Johnson was considered one of the best criminal and family lawyers in the Midwest, famous for winning impossible cases and charging fees that reached into the millions. What arguments is she using? Parental neglect, unsuitable environment for the child's development, and... Dr. Charles hesitated. "She's claiming you have an inappropriate relationship with a domestic worker." "Inappropriate relationship? What kind of relationship?" "Robert." He stood up, beginning to walk around the room. "She suggests that there is romantic involvement between you and Benita, and that this creates a promiscuous environment for a child. She attached screenshots from social media where people speculate about this." Robert felt a mix of anger and disgust. "This is ridiculous and defamatory." "It may be ridiculous, but it's strategically smart. In conservative family courts, this kind of insinuation can weigh heavily on the decision." Dr. Charles sighed. "Robert, I need to be direct with you. Victoria has a profile that traditional courts consider ideal. Single woman, no vices, higher education, stable financial situation, and full-time availability to dedicate to the child." "And what about me? I'm Lucy's biological father." "You are a politician, Robert. You travel constantly, work late, live under pressure and public scrutiny. And now, in the eyes of a conservative judge, you are living in a promiscuous environment with a housekeeper." The lawyer's voice was brutally honest. "They will argue that Lucy needs stability and traditional values." Robert sat down in the armchair, feeling the world collapse around him. "How much time do we have?" "The preliminary hearing is on Thursday. 3 days to prepare our defense." "And what are our chances?" The silence on the other end of the line was more eloquent than any answer. After hanging up, Robert went down to the kitchen and found Benita preparing breakfast, as she had done for 5 years. She was softly humming a tune while frying pancakes in the cast-iron skillet she had brought from her hometown. Lucy was still asleep. Sunday had been hectic, with visits from journalists and photographers. "Benita," Robert said, and something in the tone of his voice made her turn around immediately. "Is something wrong, Mr. Smith?" He told her about the lawyer's call, about the lawsuit. about the accusations. As he spoke, he saw Benita's face pale and her hands start to tremble. "They are saying that we—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "They are making up lies to harm us," Robert said firmly. "Benita, you need to know I will fight this with all the strength I have." She leaned against the sink, her legs weak. "Mr. Smith, maybe it's better if I leave. If my presence here is harming Lucy—" "No!" The response came louder than Robert intended. "You are not going anywhere. I won't let them destroy our family out of prejudice and envy." "But what if they win? What if they take Lucy away?" Benita's eyes filled with tears. "I wouldn't survive losing another child." Robert stepped closer and for the first time in 5 years hugged Benita. It was a brotherly embrace, protective, sealing an alliance that went beyond any employment contract. "They won't take Lucy, I promise." At that moment, small bare feet came down the stairs. Lucy appeared in the kitchen wearing a pink pajama with unicorn designs, her hair messy, and a face that showed she had just woken up. "Why are you two hugging? Did something happen?" She approached with the keen intuition of children who sense tension even when adults try to hide it. Robert knelt to be at eye level with his daughter. "Lucy, sweetheart, do you remember Aunt Victoria from Atlanta? The one who complains about my mess when she visits?" Lucy made a face. "She doesn't like me very much." "Why do you think that?" "Because she always says I should be more polite, quieter, better behaved, and she doesn't like it when I call Aunt Benita Aunt." Lucy approached Benita and took her hand. "Why, Aunt Benita?" Benita also knelt, meeting Lucy's height. "Sometimes, my love, people have different ideas about how families should be. Aunt Victoria thinks families can only be formed by people who were born together." "But that's silly," Lucy exclaimed with the brutal honesty of children. "Family is who cares, who loves, who comforts us when we're sick. You and Dad take care of me, so you are my family." The girl's words echoed in the kitchen with the force of a simple and undeniable truth. Robert felt a steely determination forming in his chest. It didn't matter how many lawyers Victoria hired, how much money she spent, or how many lies she invented. Lucy knew exactly what family was, and he wouldn't let anyone destroy that. "Lucy," he said, "Aunt Victoria is trying to convince a judge that it would be better for you to live with her in Atlanta." Lucy's green eyes widened in shock. "But I don't want to live in Atlanta. I want to live here with both of you." "And you will continue living here," Robert said with conviction. "But we might need to talk to a judge to explain why our family is happy the way it is." "Will the judge understand?" Lucy asked, worried. "Yes," Benita replied, though her own voice trembled with uncertainty. "Judges are intelligent people who listen to children." Robert hoped Benita was right, but he knew the judicial system well enough to understand that intelligence was not always the most relevant criterion in decisions involving class prejudice and traditional concepts of family. The phone rang again. This time it was John Carlos, his press advisor. "Robert, we have a situation. Someone leaked information about the custody case to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. They are going to publish an article tomorrow morning titled 'Congressman's Family in Controversial Custody Battle.' How did they get this information if the case is under seal?" "I suspect that Victoria herself leaked it. It's a strategy to pressure you through the media." John Carlos paused. "Robert, I need to warn you about something else. We've received reports that they are investigating Benita's past." Robert felt a chill. "What kind of investigation?" "Private detectives have been in Quincy, Massachusetts, asking questions about her family. They also visited the hospital where she worked here in Boston." Juan Carlos's voice was tense. "They are looking for anything that can be used against her." "Did they find anything?" "We don't know yet. But Robert, You need to prepare for the possibility that they will make something up if they don't find anything real. When Robert hung up, he looked at Benita and saw the same fear in her eyes that he felt. They were no longer just two people fighting for a child. They were two people from different social classes, facing a system designed to favor the privileged. "Benita," he said, "I'm going to make some calls. I know people who can help." "What kind of people?" "Real journalists, politicians who understand social justice, lawyers specializing in human rights." Robert picked up his phone. "If they want a media war, they will have one. But this time, the truth will be on our side." As Robert began to mobilize his contacts in Boston, Lucy sat on the kitchen floor and started to draw. When Benita asked what she was doing, she replied determinedly, "I'm drawing our family to show the judge, so he can see that we are happy and that we love each other." It was a simple drawing made with colored pencils on a sheet of paper, but in those childlike strokes was the most compelling evidence that some truths don't need expensive lawyers or sophisticated arguments to be understood. Sometimes all it takes is the pure gaze of a 5-year-old to show the world what really matters. On Tuesday morning, the kitchen of the Lakeview mansion had turned into a real headquarters. The solid wood table where Lucy usually had breakfast was covered with documents, laptops, and cell phones. Dr. Charles Smith had arrived at 7 in the morning, accompanied by his legal team, and since then he had not stopped making calls and analyzing legal precedents. Benita watched all that movement with a mix of fascination and terror. She had never seen so many lawyers together, all wearing expensive suits and speaking in legal jargon that she barely understood. She felt like an intruder in her own drama, a piece in a game whose rules she did not know. "Benita, I need you to tell me everything about your life in the last 10 years, said Dr. Marina Vasconcelos, a family law attorney that Dr. Charles had called in as reinforcement. She was a 50-year-old black woman, a graduate of Harvard University with a solid reputation in cases involving domestic workers' rights. "Everything?" Benita asked nervously. "Everything. Where you lived, where you worked, who you associated with, what kind of problems you had or didn't have." Dr. Marina opened a recorder. "They will investigate every aspect of your life, looking for something they can use against you. We need to get ahead of this." Benita took a deep breath and began to recount. She spoke about her poor childhood in Quincy, about marrying at 18 to João Santos, a construction worker who died in a work accident when she was pregnant, about the struggle to raise João Pedro alone, about working as a domestic worker in Boston to pay the bills, about her son's death from pneumonia in a public hospital without adequate resources. "It was after João Pedro died that I came to Boston," she said, her voice choked. "I couldn't stay in Massachusetts anymore. Everything there reminded me of him." "And how did you get the job at St. Mary's Hospital?" "My cousin Conceição worked at the reception. She helped me get a position as a cleaning assistant." Benita wiped a tear. "That's where I met Mrs. Mary." Dr. Marina was taking notes quickly. "Benita, have you ever been arrested? Have you had problems with drugs, alcohol, any kind of addiction?" "Never, doctor. I don't even drink beer." "Romantic relationships after your husband's death?" Benita blushed. "No, doctor. After João Pedro died, I kind of closed that part of my life. All my love went into taking care of Lucy." Robert, who was on a call with a federal representative in the next room, heard part of the conversation and felt his heart tighten. He only now realized the sacrifice that Benita had made. A young and attractive woman who had given up any personal life to dedicate herself entirely to her daughter. "Dr. Marina," Robert interrupted when he finished the call, "I just spoke with Federal Representative Marcio Resende, who chairs the Human Rights Commission. He wants to help." "How?" "He will use his mandate to request information on how the investigations against Benita are being conducted. If there is any irregularity, he can expose it publicly." At that moment, Juan Carlos rushed in, urgency on his face. "Robert, we have good news and bad news. The good news is that the Master Families of the Heart movement is exploding on social media. Thousands of people are sharing stories of non-traditional families that have worked out. And the bad news? Victoria gave an interview to the New York Magazine. It's coming out tomorrow with the title The Politician and the Maid, When Charity Becomes Promiscuity." Juan Carlos showed the phone with the preview of the article. "She is insinuating that you have a relationship and that Lucy is being used as a puppet in a political charade." Robert felt the anger rise in his throat. "She can't do that. It's defamation." "She can and she did," Dr. Charles said, looking over his glasses. "Technically, she didn't state anything. She just questioned and raised suspicions. It's a clever legal strategy." Benita had turned completely pale. "Mr. Robert, maybe it's better if I really leave. I can't let them destroy your reputation because of me." "Benita, stop that!" Robert slammed his hand on the table hard enough to make everyone fall silent. "You are not going anywhere. And do you know why? Because if we run away now, if we hide, we will be admitting that there is something wrong with our family, and there is nothing wrong." Dr. Marina looked at Robert with approval. "He is right, Benita. Running away would confirm their suspicions. But what if the judge believes these lies? Then he is not a judge worthy of deciding about Lucy's future," Robert replied firmly. At that moment, Lucy rushed down the stairs, still in her pajamas, carrying her school backpack. "Dad, Mrs. Smith said I'm not going to school today. Why?" Robert exchanged glances with the lawyers. They had decided to keep Lucy at home until the situation was resolved, fearing that journalists or curious onlookers might approach her at school. "Princess, you're on vacation for a few days," he gently lied, "but I want to see my friends, and Ms. Carla said we were going to do a volcano experiment today." Lucy was clearly frustrated. At 5 years old, she didn't understand why her routine had been completely altered, why there were so many strangers in the house, and why the adults were constantly whispering. "Lucy," Benita knelt down to the girl's level. "Do you remember when I told you about the time when I was little and sometimes had to stay home because there was a storm outside?" Lucy nodded. "And you said that when the storm passed, the sun would shine even brighter." "Exactly. Now we're in a storm, but it will pass soon. And when it passes, can I go back to school?" "Yes, my love." Lucy seemed satisfied with the explanation. She walked over to Robert and climbed onto his lap. "Dad, I dreamed about Mommy in heaven again yesterday." Robert felt a chill. "What did she say this time?" "She said that sometimes the meanest people try to separate those who love each other, but love is stronger than evil." Lucy spoke with the seriousness of children who convey important messages. "And she said something for you." "For me?" She said, "Tell Robert that he doesn't need to be afraid. I chose Benita for a reason, and that reason will become clear to everyone." A reverent silence filled the kitchen. Even the lawyers, used to dealing only with concrete facts, were impressed by the girl's naturalness and conviction. Dr. Charles was the first to recover. "Robert, should we use these dreams as testimony? I know it might sound strange, but in custody cases, a child's wishes carry legal weight. Do you think a judge will take dreams seriously? If we present it properly, as a manifestation of the child's subconscious, expressing her emotional needs and bonds, it could work." Dr. Marina nodded. "I have experience with cases where children show preferences through unconventional manifestations. The important thing is to show that Lucy has solid and healthy bonds with both of you." Robert's phone rang. It was an unknown number, but he decided to answer. Representative Smith, this is Teresa Johnson, President of the National Federation of Domestic Workers. Robert recognized the name. Teresa Johnson was a respected union leader who had fought for decades for the rights of domestic workers in the U.S. Representative, I'm calling to offer our help. Your case has become a symbol of the fight against social prejudice. We want to organize a demonstration of support. What kind of demonstration? A public event on Capitol Hill. Thousands of domestic workers, nannies, caregivers, all showing that family is made with love, not just a paycheck. Teresa's voice was filled with emotion. Benita represents all of us who raise other people's children as if they were our own. Robert looked at Benita, who had overheard the conversation and had tears in her eyes. Teresa, it would be an honor to have that support. Then it's set for Thursday, 1 hour before the hearing. We will show this court that the whole country is watching. When Robert hung up, there was a new determination on his face. The battle had become bigger than his family. It was now a matter of social justice, of human rights, of showing the country that prejudice could not triumph over love. Benita, he said, are you ready to become a symbol? She looked at Lucy, who was quietly drawing on a piece of paper, unaware of the magnitude of the moment they were living. If it's to protect our girl, she replied, I'm ready for anything. Thursday, 7 in the morning. The sky over Boston was clear and blue, without a cloud in sight, as if nature itself wanted that day to be crystal clear for all sides of the truth. Robert hadn't slept well during the night, getting up several times to check if Lucy was okay and if Benita hadn't changed her mind about facing the court. The Lakeview mansion had been buzzing with activity since 5 in the morning. Dr. Marina had arrived with a team of 3 lawyers and a pile of documents proving Benita's exemplary history. Dr. Charles coordinated the legal strategy while having his 5th cup of coffee of the day. John was answering calls from journalists from various states who wanted to cover the hearing. Benita, you need to eat, Mrs. Smith insisted, placing a plate of cheese omelette in front of her. The usually reserved housekeeper had become a fierce ally since she understood the magnitude of the injustice being committed. I can't eat anything, Mrs. Smith. I'm afraid I'll throw up, Benita admitted, her hands trembling as she held the cup of coffee. Benita, Robert sat down next to her at the kitchen table. Do you remember what you told me on the first day we really talked, about Mrs. Mary asking you to take care of Lucy? I remember. Then remember that you are fulfilling a sacred promise. This isn't about you or me. It's about honoring a mother's last wish. Lucy came down the stairs at that moment, wearing her favorite blue dress, the same one she had worn on her last birthday. She had chosen the outfit herself, saying she wanted to look pretty to talk to the judge. Good morning, family, she said cheerfully, as if it were any normal day. The girl's naturalness brought a momentary relief to the tension that dominated the house. Robert picked Lucy up and kissed her forehead. Good morning, Princess. Did you sleep well? I did, and I dreamed about Mommy in heaven again. Lucy settled in her father's lap. She said today is a very important day and that I need to tell the truth to the judge. And will you know how to tell the truth? Of course. The truth is that I love both of you and want to be with you forever. At 9 in the morning, a convoy of 3 cars left the mansion heading to the Atlanta courthouse. Robert drove the first car, carrying Lucy and Benita. Behind them were the lawyers and advisors. The third car was for the hired security, necessary due to the threats Robert had received from radical conservative groups. During the 2-hour drive, Lucy hummed children's songs and played with a doll that Benita had made for her from scraps of fabric. The girl's tranquility contrasted with the anxiety of the adults, who checked documents and reviewed arguments for the 100th time. Aunt Benita, Lucy said as they were approaching Atlanta, are you scared? A little, my love. You don't need to be scared. Mommy in heaven is taking care of everything." When they arrived at the courthouse, Robert was shocked by what he found. Hundreds of people were gathered in front of the building, holding signs with phrases like, "Family is love, not DNA," "Bonita, Mother of the Heart," and "Justice for Nannies in America." Teresa Smith had kept her promise. Domestic workers from across the country had mobilized to support the cause. "My God," Bonita murmured, seeing the crowd. "So many people." "So many people who love you," Robert corrected. "So many people who understand what you represent." At the same time, across the street, a smaller but more organized group displayed banners with opposing messages. "Traditional American family," "Children need moral values," and "Enough of cultural Marxism." Victoria Pacheco was among them, giving interviews to conservative broadcasters. The entrance to the courthouse was tense. Reporters shouted questions, photographers flashed their cameras, and security had to clear a path through the crowd. Lucy, frightened by all the noise, clung to Bonita's neck and hid her face. "It's okay, my love," Bonita whispered in the girl's ear. "These people are here because they love us." The courtroom was small and formal, with dark wood on the walls and the seal of the Georgia Supreme Court hanging behind the judge's chair. Dr. Joseph Anderson, 62 years old, a magistrate known for his conservative decisions in family cases, entered promptly at 10 o'clock. Victoria was seated on the left side of the room, accompanied by Mark Johnson and two other lawyers. She wore a discreet grey suit and an expression of studied suffering, as if she were a loving aunt, struggling to save her niece from a degrading situation. "Your Honor," Mark Johnson began his argument in a solemn voice, "we are here to protect an innocent child from a situation that, while it may seem emotionally charged on the surface, poses a serious risk to her moral and psychological development." He walked around the room with the theatricality of someone used to impressing jurors. "Lucy Smith is a 5-year-old girl who tragically lost her mother and now lives in a home where the boundaries between employer and employee have been dangerously blurred." Robert felt Bonita tense beside him. The respondent, Congressman Robert Smith, publicly declares that a domestic worker is a member of the family, creating an inappropriate social and hierarchical confusion for a child in development. Johnson paused dramatically. "Even more seriously, there are well-founded suspicions of an intimate relationship between the respondent and the employee, characterizing a promiscuous environment." "Objection, Your Honor." Dr. Mary stood up. "There is not a single piece of evidence of an intimate relationship, only slanderous insinuations." "Objection noted," the judge replied emotionlessly. "Continue, Mr. Johnson." "The petitioner, Victoria Pacheco, sister of the deceased child's mother, offers a traditional home with solid Christian values and a morally appropriate environment for Lucy's development." When it was time for the defense, Dr. Mary stood up with determination. "Your Honor, this case is not about traditions or moralism. It is about what is best for Lucy Smith, a specific girl with specific needs." She addressed the judge firmly. "Bonita dos Santos Silva is not just an employee who has become dear. She is the woman chosen by Lucy's own mother on her deathbed to care for the child." Dr. Mary presented the letter from Mary, duly authenticated by handwriting experts. "This letter, written by the late Mary Smith moments before her death, proves that Bonita's presence in Lucy's life was not accidental, but a conscious and loving maternal decision." The judge examined the letter for several minutes. "And how can we be sure that this letter is authentic and not forged? We have 3 independent handwriting reports confirming the authenticity, as well as the testimony of the nurse who was present in the hospital the night it was written." Then came the most important moment, Lucy's testimony. The girl was called to the front and sat in a special high chair, swinging her legs that didn't reach the ground. The judge spoke to her in a softer voice. "Lucy, do you know why you are here today?" "Yes, sir, because Aunt Victoria thinks I should live with her instead of living with my daddy and Aunt Benita." "And what do you think about that?" Lucy looked directly into the judge's eyes with the brutal honesty of children. "I think Aunt Victoria doesn't understand what family is. Family is not just who you were born with. Family is who takes care of you when you're sick, who tells stories at bedtime, who teaches you how to tie your shoes, who makes delicious food, and who gives you tight hugs." The judge leaned forward. "And who does those things for you? My daddy and Aunt Benita, they are my family." "Really?" Lucy paused and then added, "The Heavenly Mother chose Aunt Benita especially for me. She tells me this in my dreams." Victoria couldn't contain herself. "Your Honor, this is psychological manipulation. They are making the child believe in fantasies." "Silence!" The judge banged the gavel. "The child has the right to speak." Lucy continued unfazed. "I don't want to live in Atlanta. I want to stay in Boston, in my house, with my family. If you send me away, I will be very sad, and the Heavenly Mother will be sad too." When Lucy finished speaking, a profound silence filled the room. Even Victoria seemed shaken by her niece's conviction. The judge announced a 2-hour recess for deliberation. During this time, Robert, Benita, and Lucy waited in a private room at the courthouse, surrounded by lawyers trying to predict the outcome. "Whatever the decision," Robert said, holding Benita's hand, "I want you to know that you have changed our lives for the better, and we will keep fighting no matter what happens today." At 4 in the afternoon, the judge returned with his decision. The room was packed, with journalists jotting down every word. "After carefully analyzing all the elements presented," he began, "this court has reached a conclusion." Robert held Benita's hand, who in turn held Lucy's hand. The three waited together for the verdict that would define the future of their unconventional family, deeply united by love and the memory of a woman who had orchestrated all of this from her deathbed. The judge cleared his throat and continued, "The custody of Lucy Smith remains with her biological father, Robert Smith, with Benita Smith as the legal caregiver and auxiliary guardian, as desired by the child's deceased mother." The room erupted in applause and tears. Outside, the crowd that had been waiting celebrated as if it were a victory in the World Cup. Victoria left the courthouse without speaking to anyone, defeated not only legally but morally. Lucy hugged Benita and Robert at the same time, whispering, "The Heavenly Mother was right. Love always wins." And for the first time in 5 years, Robert fully understood that some victories are worth any struggle, and that true love always finds a way to prevail, even against society's most ingrained prejudices. 6 months after the court decision that changed their lives forever, the Smith family, as they were now officially known, was preparing for a special milestone. It was a December morning in Boston, and the endless blue sky announced another sunny day in the capital. In the Lakeview mansion, which now radiated joy in every room, preparations for Lucy's 6th birthday were bustling throughout the house. "Aunt Benita, did you see my new dress?" Lucy shouted from the top of the stairs, her voice echoing through the house with the contagious energy of a truly happy child. "It's in your closet, my love. The blue one with embroidered flowers," Benita replied from the kitchen, where she was supervising the preparation of the chocolate cake with strawberry frosting, a special recipe she had learned from her grandmother in Massachusetts and that Lucy considered the best in the universe. The transformation in the family dynamic was evident in every detail. Robert had drastically changed his work routine, refusing unnecessary trips and meetings that extended beyond business hours. For the first time in his political career, he set clear boundaries between public and private life, understanding that being a father was his most important role. Benita, in turn, had enrolled in the education program at Harvard University, through a scholarship program for domestic workers that Robert had helped create in Congress. 3 times a week, she attended classes on the Planaltina campus, studying with the dedication of someone who discovered that it's never too late to fulfill old dreams. "Daddy! Daddy!" Lucy ran down the stairs, now wearing the blue dress that highlighted her green eyes. "The guests are already arriving." Through the living room window, Robert saw the first cars parking in the yard. This year's birthday party would be different from all the previous ones. In past years, the celebrations were formal events with children of politicians and business people, organized by an expensive catering service at an exclusive club. This time, Lucy had personally chosen each guest: schoolmates, children of the household staff, kids from the community where Benita volunteered on Saturday mornings. "Dr. Mary has arrived," Mrs. Smith announced, opening the front door. The lawyer, who had become a friend of the family, entered carrying a gift wrapped in colorful paper and a genuine smile. In the months following the trial, she had closely followed the process of formalizing Benita's guardianship and had become a confidant of the family on legal and personal matters. "How is our birthday girl?" she asked, hugging Lucy affectionately. "Very happy. Daddy said that today I can make 3 wishes because I'm turning 6, Lucy replied, beaming. "And do you already know what the wishes are?" Lucy nodded seriously. "I already made the first one, that our family stays together forever. I will make the second one when I blow out the candles. And the third one is a secret." Gradually, the mansion's garden filled with life. Children ran among the fruit trees that Robert had planted especially for Lucy. Colorful balloons adorned the branches of the ipay trees, which were blooming with their characteristic yellow flowers of the Boston summer. A large inflatable pool had been set up on the lawn, where the children cooled off from the December heat. Teresa Smith, the union leader who had organized the support demonstration during the trial, arrived accompanied by some domestic workers who had become symbols of the fight for the rights of their category. They brought simple but meaningful gifts: handmade dolls, children's books, clothes they had embroidered themselves. "Benita has become our inspiration," Teresa told Robert as they watched the children play. In your case, we managed to pass 3 bills expanding the rights of domestic workers. You can't imagine how many women came to us, sharing stories similar to hers." Robert smiled, understanding that his family's struggle had transcended their personal lives. "Teresa, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course. Do you think we did the right thing? Sometimes I worry that all this public exposure might have harmed Lucy in some way." Teresa looked at the girl, who at that moment was teaching a younger friend how to make soap bubbles. "Robert, look at your daughter. Have you ever seen a child more secure, more confident, more loving? You didn't just do the right thing. You showed the whole of America that family is about love, not social conventions." At that moment, Victoria Smith appeared at the entrance of the mansion. Robert felt his blood run cold. In the months following the trial, his sister-in-law had kept a total distance from the family, refusing to answer phone calls or respond to messages. Her presence there was completely unexpected. "She wants to come in," said the security guard over the intercom. Robert looked at Benita, who had stopped arranging the sweets on the table to observe the situation. Lucy, sensing the tension among the adults, approached curiously. "Daddy, who is she?" "It's Aunt Victoria, Princess. She wants to come in." Lucy made a thoughtful expression. "Did she come to fight with us again?" "I don't know, my love. What do you think we should do?" The girl looked at Benita, then at Robert, and finally at the other children playing in the garden. "I think today is my birthday, and I can choose who stays at my party. If Aunt Victoria promises not to say bad things about Aunt Benita, she can come in." Robert smiled at his daughter's maturity. "Then let's talk to her." Victoria entered hesitantly, carrying a wrapped gift and a sheepish expression. At 50, she seemed to have aged more than usual in recent months. Her clothes were simpler than usual, and there was a vulnerability in her eyes that Robert had never seen before. "Robert," she said, her voice low, "can I talk to you for a few minutes?" They moved to a more private area of the garden, near the rose bush that Robert had planted in memory of Mary. Lucy followed them, insisting that she wanted to be part of the conversation. I came to apologize," Victoria began, the words coming out with difficulty. "These last few months have made me reflect on many things. Please subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and if you watched until now, comment, 'I watched until now,' and leave your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the final screen. It's very emotional."